There were also several Egyptian Islamic Jihad members who were able to escape from the country and thereby from the investigation into the East Africa embassy bombings. For instance, we discovered that an operative who used the alias Abdul Rahman al Masri and who had connections to Yemen had found his way to Italy, where he was staying with Sibida's brother in law in Turin. Because of the alias, we thought at that first time that he might be the bomb maker, Abu Abdul Rahman al Mujahir, and that he had helped build the bombs detonated in 1998. We knew that Mujahir used a fake Yemeni passport and was Egyptian. I traveled to Italy along with other FBI agents and Assistant U.S. Attorney Pat Fitzgerald to determine if Mujahir and Abdur Rahman al Masri were indeed the same person. We were assisted in Turin by members of the Italian Division of General Investigators and Special Operations, or Divisione Investigazioni Generali e Speciali. The team was headed by Giuseppe Petrosni from the Counterterrorism Department. The Turin police arrested the individual. However, upon questioning, we found that he wasn't Mujahir, but another Egyptian Islamic Jihad operative from Albania with the same alias. We found weapons and wigs where he was staying, along with correspondence between him and Hadi al-Sibri, in which Sibai, working from London, tried to arrange fake passports. While we hadn't found Mujahir, we had broken up an Egyptian Islamic Jihad plot in Italy. The challenge in working with the Italians was one of language. Although much later in the process, we worked with Massimo De Benedictis, a Digos officer who was fluent in English. When we first arrived, not a single officer spoke English fluently, and none of us spoke Italian. The FBI representative who spoke Italian and who would normally have handled the assignment was out of the country on personal matters. We communicated through an interpreter who spoke Italian and Arabic. She translated from Italian to Arabic, and I then translated from Arabic to English from my colleagues. During one conversation in broken English, Petrosny kept referring to Lewis. What do you mean? I asked. Lewis, he said, pointing at the suspect. The suspect wasn't named Lewis, so I thought perhaps there was something else involved whom we didn't know about. If not that, I jokingly speculated he might be talking about Louis Freeh, the director of the FBI. Eventually, through the translator, I discovered that he wasn't saying the name Lewis, but Louis, the word for him. This became a running joke between Petrodosny and us, happily. He always saw the funny side of things. We became good friends with him and Kaiser and other members of their team, and their assistance and hospitality created a lasting bond between us. While we were tracing leads and striving to disrupt possible threats by al Qaeda, other agents and analysts from the I 49 squad were also tracking terrorists connected to the East Africa embassy bombings. Their efforts uncovered Nazi Abdul Hamid al Rukai, the real name of Anas al Libi, the Libyan al Qaeda member who had cased the Nairobi embassy with Ali Mohammed. He was found to be residing in Manchester, England. John O'Neill assembled a team to accompany him to the United Kingdom. We were met in London by SO 13 detectives, and together we boarded a train to Manchester. There we were met by a local police detective assigned to assist us. John asked me to brief the team on Libby. Anas al-Libi is a senior al-Qaeda operative, I told him. He's a computer expert and was part of the team that did surveillance on the embassy in Nairobi. This is potentially a big win for us. What are we looking for? Detective asked. We're looking for any notes, pictures, documents, anything related to Al Qaeda, the embassy bombings, or the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, which he's also a member of, as well as being a member of Al Qaeda. We need to find in his possession evidence linking him to the bombings, or we won't be able to hold him. Libby's location was raided, and he was caught before he could escape. He was brought down to the police station for preliminary questioning, and in the meantime, his property was searched, and all potential evidence was brought into the office. In his interview with the British police, he didn't cooperate and denied involvement in terrorism. As the detective searched through Libby's computer files and possessions, it soon became apparent that in this case, unlike raids on the other operatives, there was no smoking gun evidence that would tie Libby to the attacks and allow us to hold him. He was one of the more intelligent Al Qaeda operatives and had closely observed how we arrested other operatives. Beyond going into hiding, he had destroyed as much evidence as he could. His computer hard drive had been cleaned, and no incriminating files were filed. Sorry, we're going to have to release him, a Manchester police detective told us. Under British law, we cannot continue holding him just on suspicion. We need concrete evidence. And in his interview, he denied everything. But if you release him, you can't be certain he'll skip town before we have time to sort through all the evidence and find something, which I'm sure is there, John said. Sorry, it's British law. Libby was released and invaded the team that was sent to follow him. We didn't know where he had disappeared to, but we were pretty certain he was on his way to Afghanistan. While he fled, our British partners gave us access to all the evidence recovered from his residence. We searched through his computer files and other property, consoling ourselves with the thought map that, though we had lost a man, we could find something of use against al-Qaeda. Searching through one pile of files, documents, and books in Arabic, I saw what looked like a journal. I pulled it out from the pile and flicked through. It was full of photocopied handwritten pages. I turned to the first page, and on it was a note saying, "It is forbidden to take this out to the guest house." I started reading and saw it was full of lessons, as the book termed it, for terrorist operations, covering everything from necessary qualifications to espionage techniques and torture methods. It was written by an Egyptian Islamic jihad instructor based on his experiences in Egypt fighting the Mubarak regime. Once I had skimmed a substantial portion of it, I told the team that it looked to be something of considerable interest. "What is it?" asked Jack Clunan, the CJ team. "It's the training manual that operatives, I'm guessing al-Qaeda operatives, use. It lists everything from how they should conceal themselves to the importance of conducting special operations." "But does that actually lead us to any terrorists?" an officer asked. "Not directly, but it will. This teaches us exactly how the terrorists are taught to think and prepare themselves for operations and interrogations. It offers insight into their mindset and behavior patterns we need to watch for. So it should help us catch them, and, when we catch them, understand how to interrogate them successfully." "Can you give an example of what the book says?" John asked. "Sure. For example, this chapter contains instructions on how the covert operations should act. They're told not to reveal their real names, even to the other members. They are told to remove anything that indicates they are Islamists. For example, beards, long shirts, copies of the Quran, or greetings such as 'May God reward you' are to be avoided. They're also told to avoid visiting public spaces such as libraries and mosques. They should avoid attracting any attention to themselves. It even says that they need to be careful where they park. They're warned not to speak to their wives about anything that they're doing." "Another chapter here," I said, reading as I spoke, "is on the cell model they use, which is the cluster model, where cell members don't know members of other cells." "Why is that?" John asked. "It says so that if one part of the cell is caught, everyone else won't be compromised. They don't even know the communication methods their members of other cells use. Cell members are told not to recognize one another in public." "That's amazing," declared an FBI colleague. "It is. Look at this section here on safe houses. The manual says their ground floor facilities are preferred, as they offer more escape options. All safe houses must have contingency plans for speedy evacuation, as well as secure areas to hide documents. And anyone going into a safe house needs to have sufficient cover so as to avoid attention. No two safe houses should be rented from the same office or in the same area. They're very careful." "What does the section on interrogations tell them to do if they're caught?" John asked. "Hold on," I said, and I went to the section and sped through the pages. "Well, what's interesting is that it warns operatives that they'll be subjected to torture when caught. It tells them to hold off as much as they can, especially for the first 48 hours. Why 48 hours? Another colleague asked. It says because they will give fellow cell members enough time to reorganize, rendering information less valuable. And it tells them to be expected to be tortured? Yes. This manual is actually written warning them that what would happen if the Egyptian or other Middle Eastern governments arrest them. It says their sisters and mothers will be raped in front of them, and they themselves will be sodomized by dogs. And they have to bear it? They're told that their reward will come in heaven, that they can pretend to cooperate in order to trick the interrogator. Meaning what? John asked. Well, it says they should give information to the interrogator, so the interrogator thinks the terrorist is cooperating, but merely the information he's given up is invaluable. Later translated into English, the Manchester Manual, as it came to be known, was used by CIA contractors to justify the use of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques authorized by the administration of President George W. Bush. To anyone who understood the point of the manual, this is ironic, as the manual teaches terrorists to expect and endure far worse. It is no surprise that these harsh techniques failed to work. Ali, I want you to head to Pakistan. We got a potentially very important source who had come in, and I want you to evaluate him, John O'Neill told me. This was early 2000. Sure, boss, what's the backstory? It's a man who approached an agent from the blank in saying that he had been working with blank and didn't like them, so he wanted to work with the U.S. against them. Well, that's pretty convenient for us, I said. You'd think, but the source didn't have anything on drug trafficking, so he was out of the area of interest. But when the source met with the agency, he was told that they weren't interested and sent him away. Why? Apparently, they think he is full of it and lying, but our guest of the FBI, Chris Ryman, called me to say he thinks the guy's the real deal. Go to blank, John continued, and meet him and evaluate him. And if he's credible, get information and arrange a permanent way of contacting him. Yes, sir. One more thing. Make sure you thank him and let him know we're appreciative. Mike Doris, who was assigned to the FBI office in Islamabad, and blank, explained the situation to me in more detail. The CIA asked the source a series of questions about bin Laden. He didn't know much about the main target, as he was dealt with mid-level al-Qaeda guys, not the leadership. Well, that's pretty bad, I said, shaking my head. It gets worse. The source then came back to blank again, saying he wanted to share information. The first time, the blank asked him to the blank official, who again turned him away. The second time, thankfully, the blank agent included me. I realized this source could be abused, so I sent you guys a message to Chris Raymond. In Pakistan, the DA agent arranged for us and another FBI agent, Jennifer Keenan, from the I-49 squad, to meet the man. When the CIA got wind of the meeting, a different officer from the agency came. As we had flown all the way from New York to meet the source, the officer guessed that he was probably more valuable than his colleague had thought. Unlike Junior, the man didn't know much about the top-level al-Qaeda operatives and other radical terrorists whom he had never heard about. It was clear he disliked al-Qaeda, both from a personal and an ideological point of view. We tilted the questions toward what we thought would be abuse. I don't know bin Laden. You know a lot about bin Laden, he told me during one conversation. I didn't tell him that I had heard the name blank before. It had come up during the questioning of Muhammad al-Ohali, the failed suicide bomber from the East Africa embassy bombings. Ohali had said that when he and Jihad Ali made their martyrdom videos, blank, that he was someone important we should be on the lookout for. Who blank is very valuable to bin Laden, I later asked the source. Who are they? We wrote all the way up the information the source had given us, and it was deemed both credible and significant by FBI analysts back in the United States. We thanked the man and arranged a method to maintain contact. We also briefed the CIA on our evaluation of the information that had been supplied. When I returned to the United States, I found that the CIA was now interested in our man. I've traveled with my supervisor at the time, John Liguri, and my partner, Steve Bongard, to Langley to brief the agency. There, we found that there was an internal CIA disagreement between the Counterterrorism Center and the Near East Division about who, from their side, would handle them. As far as shared access with the CIA was concerned, we didn't mind at all. The source could be useful to us both. The agency had expertise in safely handling sources. Nevertheless, in the past, in the East Africa Embassy bombings investigation in Albania and in other cases, evidence had been tainted and made unusable for prosecutions because CIA officers had, in fact, mishandled the chain of custody, or there were discrepancies between information that was sent through CIA channels and what was reported in FBI channels. This could cause considerable problems during the prosecution phase. One doesn't know who to trust. To make matters clear this time, John Liguori spelled out the terms. One thing needs to be clear, he told the CIA. The source is our source. He's a criminal source who's providing information on the fugitives from the East Africa Embassy bombings. The intelligence we gain might be used for investigations and prosecutions. You are welcome to use them as well, but all meetings need to be done jointly, and we have to be included in the reporting. All information needs to be coordinated because it will one day be used in a court of law. Absolutely, we respect that, said a senior CIA officer. Good, John said. Remember, any intelligence gain has to be exactly the same in your reports as in our 302 reports, so that when it comes to court, there are no contradictions. The 302 is a form used for reporting information that is likely to become a testimony. It contains a digest of the interview conducted. They readily agreed to our terms. I traveled a few times with Steve Bongard to Pakistan to meet the source. We made efforts to protect him. We didn't want Pakistani or other intelligence agents knowing about our meetings with him. Whenever we were in the country, Pakistani agents tried to tell us. And they even tried to tail us. They weren't even very efficient. It made it easy to lose them. Sometimes they would tell us to keep ourselves close to them. Sometimes, however, we enjoyed playing games and them to show them that how ridiculous the situation was. One time, after our finished mission, we were ready to go home the next morning. Steve and I walked out of our rooms. We went to the elevator, spotted a man who had been following us for a few days. While he claimed to be a receptionist on our floor, he repeatedly popped up whenever we were. And he didn't wear a hotel uniform or seem to be doing any administrative work. As the elevator doors opened, we stepped in, and he followed us in. Oh, excuse me, I said out loud. I forgot something. Steve and I stepped out of the elevator, and the receptionist jumped out. Actually, I have it, Steve said, playing along, and we both stepped back in, as did the man. We jumped out, and he jumped out. You're burned, I told him with a big smile. Tell them they need to send someone else to follow us. His face went red, and we walked off.